What are we watching this week? We are watching 3 different films, starting with Bill and Ted Face the Music. And Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter are back as Ted and Bill. And it's been about 30 years since we've checked in with our most excellent stars. And those 30 years have not brought a lot of progress. Not in a bad way, not in a good way. It's just... this is basically the same film that we have seen before, and I feel like it's stuck in this weird position where if it had been anything that had super deviated from the template we'd seen before, the super nostalgic audience who was really looking for that kind of Bill and Ted hit would be upset by it. But by the same token, it means that a new audience who might not be the biggest Bill and Ted fan and might not be super familiar with the references or with the kind of cameos or the little Easter eggs might not be as enamored of it, because it's not bringing anything new to the table, but it's expecting you to be familiar with these characters. It does a bit of catch up, but more or less it just throws you into it. So for me, someone who's a casual Bill and Ted person, I am aware of Bill and Ted. Obviously I've seen it, but I haven't seen it in a really long time. But it's not one of those films that I personally go back and watch again and again and again. This was for me. It's fine as a background watch, I would say, but the fact that it's on streaming, I think, is actually a good thing. If this had come out in theaters and I paid a bunch of money to go see it, I don't know how I would have felt about it. I think one of the most interesting updates is that Bill and Ted thankfully, they did not have them play their younger selves. They are now age appropriate and they have families and they each have a daughter, and their daughters are played by Brigette Lundy-Paine and Samara Weaving. And I think those two do an excellent job of channeling the characters of Bill and Ted as the progeny of Bill and Ted, and basically they get to go on their own kind of adventure. I think there are a lot of Easter eggs and moments that fans of the originals will appreciate, but as someone, again, who needed a refresher or more of a refresher than the film provides, I was just kind of ambling along. That's the biggest thing about this thing, right? It just kind of ambles along. I'm actually now afraid to go back and watch Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure because I'm afraid it'll ruin it for me if it doesn't hold up. And that's for me personally. Again, I know there are people who are huge fans of these movies. Again, I think because it is coming out in this content drought, people are going to watch it. People are going to enjoy it to a degree, but it's not going to go down in the history books as this amazing, I can't believe they came back and these characters are back, et cetera, spectacular feat. It'll just kind of be eh. So for me, because this doesn't touch on that nostalgia factor for me or that, loyalty affinity, and as much as I love all the actors involved, like I love Keanu Reeves, right? Such a great just character, person, actor, etc., whatever. But this wasn't for me, and it wasn't meant for me. And I think the biggest challenge is if you're a super loyal fan, I don't know where this will rank for you, but just be warned that you're going to get the same stuff, but they're all going to be a little squishier and meltier, and it's basically the same plot you've seen before, and maybe you're better off just watching the original. Just putting it out there. Just a thought, but if you enjoy it, more power to you. I personally am only going to give it 3 out of 5. We're also attempting to watch this week Get Duked, which is a British/Scottish film that came out on Amazon Prime today. And the good thing for this as well is that you're not paying extra for it. You are probably paying extra for Bill and Ted, but this one is just included with Amazon Prime. And the premise is these 4 kids get dumped in the Scottish Highlands to go on this kind of adventure challenge, survival mini challenge, team building, map reading, et cetera, et cetera. They are not the most outdoors oriented kids. They are sort of lads or wannabe lads to a degree. I think there are going to be some challenges if you are not familiar with UK culture. There's no adaptation here for an American audience, and that's totally fine, right? It shouldn't have to be. I think the weirdest part to me is that Eddie Izzard is in this film. There are definitely points where it's supposed to be Eddie Izzard's character, and you're like, oh, he was clearly only available for maybe 2 days of shooting, and so it's like bad stunt doubles and voiceover, etc. And I love Eddie Izzard, and I think he's such a great actor, but I had to think to myself, what are you doing in this film, Eddie? The dynamics between the kids are fine. It's a somewhat juvenile film. I don't think it's attempting to be anything more than a juvenile film. There are a couple kind of sweet moments in it, but ultimately, again, I'm not the audience for this in a very different way. I think if you are maybe a 15-year-old aspiring to be a cool kid, maybe you'll relate to this more. I think this sets up a similar tone to something like Good Boys, which came out last year, where although that was really young kids and that sort of just that sort of camaraderie, that sort of bizarreness. And then there is a whole, it's all in the trailer, but there's a whole weird The Hunt, Most Dangerous Game aspect to this that's where it gets really weird, and there's a lot of drug references, not in a bad way. I have no problem with that, but there were a lot of kind of absurdist scenes as a byproduct of it. So watch the trailer. I think that will give you a sense of whether or not this film is for you. And chances are it's not for you. I feel like, again, it's for kind of a, not even teen, but like kind of preteen aspiring to this level of whatever, even though it's rated R. I'm only going to give it 2.5 out of 5, but that's fully acknowledging that it's not meant for me. The last thing worth watching this week, and this is actually worth watching, is You Cannot Kill David Arquette. And I didn't know anything about this film going into it, and then I watched the trailer and I went, holy cow, I have to watch this movie. I'm so excited. Watched the movie, was even more excited, and now I'm probably overhyping it, and I'm sorry, but I'm not. So I was completely unfamiliar with the fact that in 2000, David Arquette, actor David Arquette, and this is a documentary, but that actor David Arquette had entered the WCW, which, again, I learned a lot during this film. I learned a lot about wrestling. That David Arquette won the WCW, which was a competitor to the WWE World Heavyweight Championship, and it was a kind of cross-promotion with him promoting his film Ready to Rumble, and wrestling fans took it very, 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 very seriously, as they tend to take most things. And the fallout from it was just, it lasted years and years and years. And I had no idea. For me, David Arquette never fell out of the cultural zeitgeist. I hadn't exactly kept track of him, but I wasn't aware that he'd suffered, his career had struggled a little bit as a byproduct. And this film goes into all of that. And it's just things I never, ever would have expected. And so I was absolutely riveted. As someone who has friends who are very into wrestling, but knows almost nothing about it personally, it gave me a lot of insight into their lives and their fandom and how seriously they take it. And I was lucky enough to talk to David Arquette about the film after, and then I got to talk to my friend Jimbo on his podcast about it, because this is just how much I like this film, is that I want to talk more about it because it's such a weird pop culture moment catalyzed in time with a very watchable subject who just puts it all on the line. And I will say, as fake as wrestling storylines, or as manufactured as they are, there is clearly an athleticism required to compete in wrestling. So it is not fair to say that even professional kind of WWE performance wrestling is not a sport. I will absolutely say that without fail. But it pulled back a curtain that I didn't realize I wanted pulled back. And so I highly recommend you check it out. You can also, interview with David got weird and fun, and he's just a very watchable, charming character. He takes it super seriously, but I think there's kind of a joy in being along for the ride with him. So I am going to give You Cannot Kill David Arquette 4.1 out of 5. And then in some little exciting extra tidbits news, if you've made it this far, you can watch my interview with David Arquette on this channel. And now these reviews will be available as podcasts. So check those out. There should be links in the descriptions.